G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to War Thunder with Mags, and welcome back to the 1.63 dev server. Now, after the last dev server flyout, I wasn't actually sure whether or not there would be another one up. However, the very next day, I had an opportunity to jump back on and take a look at a couple of the aircraft that I was a little curious about and I thought needed a second look, and of course the two Japanese aircraft that I never got to flight test in the first place. So first up, there's only going to be 3 aircraft in this video. First up is the Su-6. Now the Su-6, well, its stats weren't overly impressive when I took a first look at it, and when I first flew it, it wasn't overly impressive. It felt very slow, very vulnerable. It was maneuverable enough, and it was a stable firing platform, but that's really all I could give it. It felt like the kind of plane that was just going to get trounced whenever it was brought out into a realistic battle, although an aircraft that could have been useful as a CAS support aircraft in War Thunder ground forces. This hasn't necessarily changed, however the plane is quite a bit nippier than it was now. With WEP, the plane can exceed 500 km an hour in level flight. Without WEP, it will reach around 480 km an hour. As you can see, it is perfectly stable for shooting. As for manoeuvrability, it seems to have been improved as well. The aircraft is actually quite nimble now at slow speeds. Even down so far as to getting to stall speeds, the aircraft never feels like it's about to lose control, as some aircraft do, even under the mouse aim instructor situation that you find in realistic battles. The turns are tight, the control is easy. For CAS purposes, this is going to be ideal to be able to keep on a target and continue applying pressure, but in a realistic battle situation, it may be enough to be able to throw off enemy aircraft that are trying to come in. So next up we have Japan's J1N1. This is one of the planes I did not get to flight test in the previous dev server, and honestly I wasn't missing much. It flies much like the heavy fighters that are already present in the game. Armament is about the same in the front end. There's really nothing surprising in terms of flight characteristic or armament with this particular aircraft, at least not in regards to forward-firing weapons. However, the bit that was interesting about this aircraft was the twin turrets mounted in the rear. When I did my first assessment of the aircraft, having not flown it, I thought this could be quite a dangerous aircraft to sit on the tail of. It turns out I was completely, utterly and totally wrong, which is why you do these flight tests in the first place. Turns out those guns can't shoot straight down the tail of this aircraft. Now honestly, I should have expected this. It was unlikely that Gaijin was going to allow a situation where a pilot could potentially shoot off their own control surfaces. But the firing area for these guns starts at about to the left and right hand side of the elevators and the height of the vertical stabilizer. That circle area cannot be fired in. The guns can fire to about 45 to 50 degrees off center to the left and right of the aircraft, so about a 90 to 100 degree firing arc to the rear, which does leave the aircraft vulnerable to side attacks, and the guns will elevate almost 90 degrees straight up. Obviously, as the guns are mounted on the top of the fuselage, they cannot fire down, but there is a circlet or a half circlet around the rear control surfaces that you cannot fire through under any circumstances. This is of course a massive vulnerability in the design. However, if pilots were to fly this thing low enough to the ground and aircraft are approaching from above, these two turrets can supply a massive amount of firepower towards anything coming from the rear. So they are still good defensive guns. There is just a hole in the defense, in the one place that it is most likely that a hostile aircraft is going to come in. It is also worth noting for sim pilots who may be interested in this aircraft, it does have a cockpit, so you can jump into it. The cockpit is actually really nicely designed. It looks really impressive. It's a real shame that War Thunder doesn't model the exhaust pops. Otherwise, with the exhaust over the top of the wings, the view out the side would be quite impressive. And last but not least, we have the P1Y1. Now, this aircraft has no forward-facing armament. It is a fast bomber torpedo bomber. It is reasonably quick for its role. Just over 500 km an hour under WEP in level flight. It'll fly stably in the high 400s without WEP and is pretty manoeuvrable, as I'll demonstrate in a moment. What does seem to be a bit of an issue with this aircraft is the defensive armament. It has two 20mm cannon turrets, one mounted in the nose, one mounted in the tail for a defensive purpose. However, the firing arcs are very restricted. As you can see here, the forward-facing 20mm gun cannot fire directly in front of the aircraft and cannot fire at anything above the height of the aircraft. It's really only good for shooting down. This is going to be very useful when using this aircraft to take out soft targets en masse. It is very easy and very suitably designed for shooting at ground targets. But using this gun to defend the aircraft, you have about a 45 degree firing arc left and right. However, the gun cannot fire until it is at least 10 degrees depressed from the attitude of the aircraft. So if somebody is coming at you in a head-on, you cannot hit them. Similar story with the rear guns. They cannot shoot down at all as the gun is mounted on top of the fuselage, as you would expect. However, your firing arc to the rear doesn't start until the height of the vertical stabilizer and only covers an arc about 45 degrees wide. Again, you've got a half circle on the tail that you can't shoot past, so if somebody gets on your 6, you're in trouble. But as you can see on the other side of things, it is a very maneuverable and very easy to control aircraft. This one also comes equipped with air brakes, so it has fantastic speed control. Causing enemy aircraft to overshoot should not be a problem in this plane whatsoever. In fact, the aircraft is so easy to fly, I decided to take a stab at carrier landing. Now, it is worth remembering here that the P1Y1 is not a naval aircraft. It is not carrier-based. This thing is designed to land on runways that are definitely on the ground. And this did actually show off a couple of things. First things first, the flap rip speed is surprisingly low. At 291 kilometers an hour, they just come straight off the plane, and there was virtually no warning that you were at an overspeed for the flaps. You got the warning at the same moment the flaps were detaching themselves from the aircraft. However, the aircraft does have a large wing area, so even without the flaps, keeping this thing stable on approach was absolutely no problem at all, although I did take a long, easy approach, nothing too fancy here. With the nose slightly elevated, using the throttle to control altitude was actually really easy on this plane, and I just pulsed the air brake when was necessary to control airspeed. Now, the wings on this aircraft, as before, are rather wide, and while this does generate a lot of lift, trying to put it down in a carrier, it means it's going to be kind of difficult to avoid that tower. Touchdown slightly up the deck. I didn't touch down right at the end. Tap the wing, snaps the wing off. Aircraft rotates on the spot, but still was moving slow enough to stop just nicely before the end of the deck of the carrier. So I think that's officially the first carrier landing of the P1Y1 in War Thunder. And honestly, it wasn't particularly difficult. If I had flaps still available on the aircraft and I had touched down on the deck sooner, I probably could have, if I stayed to the left-hand side of the deck, kept both wings intact and still managed to stop this aircraft before it rolled off the end of the deck. So this one is really easy to touch down. Unfortunately for sim pilots, as with most bombers, no cockpit available on this one, so you'll be flying from the invisible view if you choose to take this one out in sim. Anyways, ladies and gents, I hope you enjoyed the video and this quick revisit to the aircraft that I didn't get to have a good look at last time, or look at all in the case of the 2 Japanese planes on the previous video. Hope it's been informative. I have to get back to working on a tanks video. It may wind up turning into 2 videos at this rate. There is a lot of ground vehicles to go through. Until next time, click like if you do, subscribe if you want to see more. Fly smart, fly safe, and I'll catch you in the skies.